There is a fragile, unspoken social contract that governs a quiet suburban street. It relies on a mutual understanding that your property is your sanctuary and my property is mine. Most of us on this particular stretch of asphalt owned our homes, invested in our manicured lawns, and respected the invisible boundaries that kept the peace. But every neighborhood has that one anomaly, the rental property that acts as a revolving door for the chaotic, the loud, and the profoundly disrespectful. When the newest tenant moved in directly across from my house, I hoped for the best. I expected the usual minor annoyances, maybe a loud television on a Tuesday night or a poorly parked sedan. What I got instead was a closet smoker with a staggering sense of entitlement and a complete disregard for my driveway. My property boasts a rather unique geographical quirk. The house sits on a slight decline, positioned on the lower side of the street. Because of this downward slope, the driveway dips sharply toward my garage, creating a recessed pocket. If you were to stand at the bottom near my waste bins, you would be entirely invisible to the prying eyes of the houses across the street. It was an architectural blind spot, a shadowy little haven. The disruption started subtly. I went down to the bins on a crisp Tuesday morning, the air smelling of dew and eucalyptus, only to spot a stark white cylinder of discarded cellulose near the wheels of my recycling bin. A cigarette butt. I picked it up, disgusted by the acrid, stale scent of cheap tobacco, and tossed it into the trash. I assumed it had blown in from the street. But 2 days later there was another, then a cluster of 3. I stood there in the sloping shadow of my driveway, staring at the little pile of nicotine-stained litter. Someone was deliberately using my property as their personal, hidden ashtray. The bins were less than 2 meters away. They weren't even attempting to throw them out. They were just flicking them onto my concrete like they owned the place. I walked back up to the house and found my wife, Bryony, at the kitchen island, nursing her morning tea. I asked her if she had noticed anyone lurking around our bins. She gave me a look of profound bewilderment, shaking her head. It certainly wasn't anyone in our household. It's just the 2 of us, alongside our 8 cats and 2 dogs. I glanced down at our tabby Barnaby, who was currently attempting to lick his own ear. Unless the cats had suddenly developed opposable thumbs and a pack-a-day habit, the culprit was undeniably human. A few more days passed. I was off work, organizing tools in the garage, when I caught movement at the top of the driveway. It was the new guy from across the street. He paused at the lip of the concrete, glanced around with the shifty paranoia of a teenager sneaking out after curfew, and then hastily turned around and walked back across the asphalt. It was odd behavior, but it planted a seed of suspicion. If this phantom smoker thought they could use my blind spot to hide their habit, they were severely underestimating my willingness to embrace petty surveillance. I spent the afternoon researching wireless security cameras. I needed something robust, battery-operated, and entirely waterproof. I settled on a compact Eufy camera with motion detection, a brilliant little piece of hardware. I waited until dusk. Armed with a ladder and a handful of zip ties, I tucked that small, sleek lens right under the eaves of the shed roof. It pointed directly through a gap in the shed door, a perfect, unobstructed vantage point. Think of a square hole with a round peg inside. The corners offered a massive blind spot-free view of the driveway and the bins. The trap was set. It didn't even take 24 hours. The very next afternoon, my phone vibrated with a sharp, insistent notification. Motion detected at driveway. I unlocked my screen and pulled up the live feed. There he was, the neighbor from across the street. He didn't just walk down my driveway, he swaggered. He moved with this exaggerated, heavy-footed arrogance, oblivious to the digital eye recording his every move. He reached the bottom of the slope, entirely hidden from his own house, leaned against the brick retaining wall, and pulled a lighter from his pocket. The metallic click echoed softly through my phone's speaker. He sparked up, inhaling deeply, blowing a thick cloud of gray smoke into the pristine afternoon air. He stood less than 2 meters from my rubbish bins. When he finished, he didn't stub it out. He didn't walk the 2 steps to the lid. He simply flicked the glowing ember onto my driveway, turned on his heel, and wandered back to his nest. The sheer brazen audacity of it left me staring at my screen in disbelief. This man was not just littering, he was crossing a public street to use my private property as his secret dumping ground. Action was required. But I am a reasonable man. I firmly believe in giving a person enough rope to hang themselves, or at the very least, a single opportunity to correct their behavior. I checked my work roster and found a day off that aligned perfectly with his mid-afternoon smoking ritual. I waited in the living room, phone in hand. At exactly 2:15 p.m., the screen lit up. Motion detected. I didn't rush. I didn't want to startle him and send him scurrying back across the street like a frightened cockroach. I slipped out the back door, quietly navigated the side path of the house, and rounded the corner to the front yard. I timed my approach perfectly. Just as I crested the top of the driveway, he was taking his final drag. He flicked the butt toward the bins, the little white cylinder bouncing off the plastic and landing on the concrete. He stood up, brushing ash from his shirt, and turned to head back. That was when he saw me. To say he looked like a deer in headlights would be an insult to the cognitive processing speed of deer. His eyes widened, his jaw went slack, and he froze, entirely paralyzed by the sudden realization that his secret sanctuary was compromised. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, as his brain slowly rebooted. Finally, a defensive scowl twisted his features. "What the hell do you want?" he spat, his voice laced with unearned hostility. I kept my tone perfectly level, gesturing to the smoldering filter near his shoe. "Mate, if you're going to smoke down here, the least you could do is smother the butt and put it in the bin. It's right next to you," he scoffed, puffing out his chest in a sad display of territorial dominance. "You don't own this part of the strip," he sneered. "Council does. And you can't make me do a damn thing." He bumped his shoulder against mine as he shoved past, marching up the incline and retreating across the road to his rental. He genuinely thought he had won. He thought his little display of aggressive ignorance had secured his right to treat my home like a landfill. "No medal for you, buddy." The warning had been issued and ignored. The game was officially on. I dove into the settings of the Eufy camera app. It supported automatic dumping of events to a network-attached storage drive. Every time the motion sensor tripped, the camera would record the video and snap a high-resolution photo, stamping it with an unalterable time and date. All I needed to do was match the physical evidence to the digital footprint. I drove to the local wholesale supplier and purchased a massive box of small, clear Ziploc bags and a permanent marker. Every evening after the sun went down, I would walk down to the bins with a pair of long metal tongs. I would pick up his discarded cigarette butt, drop it into a fresh plastic bag, seal it, and write the exact time and date on the front. Then I would hold the bagged evidence up to the hidden camera for a few seconds, a silent, undeniable proof of authenticity, before storing it in a sealed plastic tub in my garage. This became my routine. Days turned into weeks. Weeks bled into months. The plastic tub slowly filled with hundreds of tiny, foul-smelling bags. The sheer volume of it was staggering. Whenever I felt the urge to just toss them all out and confront him again, I remembered that arrogant shoulder bump. I remembered the smirk. He wanted to play the council property card? Fine, we would play by the council's rules. 345 days, that's how long the collection lasted. I had aimed for a full year, but by day 345, the stench of stale tobacco leaching through the plastic bags was becoming a biohazard, even inside the sealed tub. It was time. It was a Friday night. I boiled the kettle, filled a massive steel thermos with dark roast coffee, and carried it into my home office. I was not going to leave this chair until the job was done. I pulled up the local Environmental Protection Authority's website. They had a portal specifically designed for citizens to report littering from vehicles or on public/council property. It was a brilliant system, designed for quick submissions. I logged in, pulled up the first photo from the NAS drive, and grabbed the corresponding Ziploc bag from the tub. Date, time, location, offender description, photographic evidence attached, submit, 1 down. 344 to go. The process was agonizingly repetitive. My wrist began to ache, the dull throb of impending carpal tunnel creeping up my forearm. The coffee burned my throat, keeping my eyes wide and focused on the glowing monitor. But with every click of the submit button, I felt a deep, resonant surge of satisfaction. The image of his smug face dissolved a little more with each form. 100 done, 200 done. By the time I hit the final 50, the sun was beginning to threaten the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple. I was exhausted, my eyes dry and gritty, but I rode a wave of pure, unadulterated euphoria. I attached the final photo. I typed the final timestamp. I clicked submit for the 345th time. I pushed back from the desk, stretched my cramping back, and stumbled toward the bedroom, ready to sleep for a week. I collapsed onto the mattress, pulling the duvet over my shoulders. Ping. My phone lit up on the nightstand. I cracked one eye open. An email. Ping, ping, 2 more. Ping, 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 ping. A relentless cascade of sharp, metallic chimes filled the quiet bedroom. For a brief panicked moment, I thought a Reddit post had gone viral or my bank account had been compromised. I grabbed the device, squinting at the glaring screen. They were automated confirmation emails from the EPA. Report received. Report received. 345 individual receipts flooding my inbox in rapid succession. I watched the numbers climb, a tired smirk spreading across my face, before I finally flipped the physical switch on the side of my phone, plunging the device into total blessed silence. The fallout took a few weeks to materialize, but when it did, it was spectacular. I was pulling weeds in the front garden when the postal worker arrived. He bypassed my house and walked across the street, struggling to force a massive, thick bundle of thick envelopes into Tarn's mailbox. It looked like he was trying to stuff a phone book through a mail slot. The next evening, the quiet of the neighborhood was shattered. Angry, guttural shouts echoed from the rental house. It was a violent, screaming blow-up between Tarn and his wife. The volume was deafening, the kind of raw, panic-laced fury that comes from discovering a life-ruining financial burden. Thankfully, one of their direct neighbors called the police. A cruiser rolled up quietly, its lights painting the street in sweeping arcs of red and blue. The officers went inside and the shouting abruptly ceased. I realized then what had happened. The council hadn't consolidated the reports. They had processed them as 345 individual offenses. At $250 per fine for littering, Tarn hadn't just received a warning. He had been handed a debt of over $86,000. A few weeks later, I witnessed something I thought physically impossible, Tarn leaving his house wearing a suit. It was cheap, poorly fitted, and he looked incredibly uncomfortable as he climbed into his car and drove away. He had chosen the go-to-court option, hoping to fight the fines. But you can't fight a mountain of time-stamped, high-definition photographs and corresponding physical evidence bagged and tagged like a homicide investigation. He left that morning and didn't return for 2 days. When he finally did, he wasn't alone. A large, battered moving truck idled on the street. Over the next 4 hours, the entire contents of the rental house were violently hauled out. A sofa, a fridge, beds, and finally, his furious-looking wife, herding 2 crying children into a separate car before peeling away without looking back. I learned through the neighborhood grapevine a month later that Tarn had taken a plea deal. To avoid actual jail time for the unpaid debt, he accepted a crippling amount of community service alongside a slightly reduced, but still monumental, fine. His wife had packed her bags the moment the magistrate brought the gavel down. The for better or worse clause of her marriage apparently didn't cover a near 6-figure penalty for flicking cigarette butts onto a neighbor's driveway. Now, he was working a miserable day job just to pay off the fines and child support, spending every weekend picking up trash on the side of the highway in a high-visibility vest. I stood at the top of my driveway looking down at the pristine, swept concrete near my rubbish bins. No ash, no smell, just the quiet, undisturbed sanctuary of my home. Godspeed, you miserable litterer. Enjoy the community service. There is a profound lesson hidden in the ashes of this story. Arrogance is a debt that always comes due, and the currency it demands is usually your peace of mind. Never underestimate the quiet neighbor, for patience and a well-placed security camera are far deadlier than any screaming match. Respect the boundaries of others, because you never know who is quietly bagging up your mistakes, waiting for the perfect moment to hand them back to you. If you enjoyed this tale of meticulous, slow-burn justice, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me in the comments below. What's the most petty, yet entirely justified, revenge you've ever taken on a terrible neighbor? Turn on notifications so you never miss a story, and I'll see you in the next video.